Title for this episode is Truth, Existence and Possibility. Now, we have discussed many things in the previous two episodes, and this one I will change tack slightly and describe three ideas about what we mean by existence, how it is sometimes manifest and unmanifest, and when it is manifest, sometimes it's called true and sometimes it's called false. The reason for this discussion is that in Vedic philosophy, as in a number of religious philosophies, the material world is considered to be somehow inferior to the spiritual world. And because it's considered inferior, some people tend to say that this material world is an illusion, whereas the spiritual world is reality. Now, in other philosophies, at least in all modern scientific philosophy, we do not accept that the material world is an illusion. Of course, illusions can also exist, but we generally do not accept that the material world is an illusion, and yet it is called avidya or ignorance. So there is a sense in which the world exists, and yet there is another sense in which it is inferior. So what are these different senses in which it's called an illusion or ignorance, and what is the sense in which it is real? So to begin discussing this, these differences between the material and the spiritual world, we should go back to that question of jnanam, where I described that initially as knowledge and then as knowability. And the general idea is that certain things are, at least in this material world, they become visible, and after some time they become invisible. And then the classic example of that visibility and invisibility is that people are born and then people die. Certain things that happened yesterday may not happen today, may again happen tomorrow, and so on. So the world is said to exist as a possibility, and which is sometimes called avyakta. And we spoke about, or we discussed how God has the possibility of the world in him, but then he expresses that possibility as speech, which is the point at which becomes manifest. Now when it becomes manifest, then it's also knowable, it becomes observable, and then we can speak about its existence. But there's a very important verse in Bhagavad Gita which says, Nasato vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate sataha ubhayor api drashtyontas tuanyos tattvadarshibhi. So in this verse, three important words are used. The first is sataha and nasata. So sata means that which exists, or that which exists eternally, and nasata means that which doesn't exist or doesn't exist eternally. Then vidyate is, vidya means knowledge, so vidyate means that which becomes knowable, and avidya would become that which is unknowable or which is incorrect knowledge. Vidya means knowledge, so in sometimes you can say that anything that's knowledge is called or experience that is vidya, and something that is an illusion, it's called avidya. And then the third word is called bhava and abhava or nabhava, which bhava means something that is present and nabhava means something that is absent. So to understand this verse in Bhagavad Gita, the first thing is that what is this sataha? What is that which exists eternally? Because obviously we cannot see everything that has existed in the past, and we don't see at the present what might exist in the future. So this existence is described as a possibility, which we can also call avyakta, unmanifest. So the first part of this verse says nasato vidyate bhavo, which means that which did not exist previously cannot come into existence. Right? So na asata means, sataha means that which exists eternally, and na asata means that which did not exist eternally. Vidyate means has become present or knowable to us, and knowable to us, and bhava means that which has become present. So we cannot know at the present what did not exist eternally. Right? So what exists eternally exists as a possibility. Now that possibility sometimes becomes manifest, which is what we call present, and when it has become reality in the sense that from a possibility to a reality, we can start calling it as existence or reality, and it becomes knowable. But all that is knowable is not necessarily true. And within truth, we can distinguish between truth, right, and good. And I'll come to that subsequently. But there are essentially three stages in which we talk about, what we mean by reality, right? So in some sense, you can say that every fact that I can observe can be called reality, but that is sort of not the definition of reality that we're looking at, because even right now I can see there's a tree, and maybe that tree will die, a few years from now, and then it will sort of cease to exist. But right now it's a fact. So the claim is that from a world of possibilities, from a realm of possibilities, a domain of possibilities, something comes into existence. And that's what is called bhava. Bhava means coming into existence. And when it comes into existence, then it becomes known. Because everything that exists may not be necessarily be known. There's this famous problem in philosophy where we say that, let's suppose an apple fell into a forest and nobody saw it. Did it really happen? If you have not seen it, right? So from the possibility, something comes into existence. When it comes into existence, then it becomes known, or it can be known. But everything that's known is not true. And everything that is true may not be right and may not be good. So we'll go into that discussion subsequently. So there are kind of these four stages where possibility becomes reality, or something comes into existence, and then it becomes knowable, and then we can decide whether it's true or not. So to start discussing some of these things, let's begin the tail end of this of these four stages, and talk about what is the difference between a fact and the truth. What is a fact and what is true? So a common example of this distinction between fact and truth always arises whenever we have a sentence, for example, or something or anything that has meaning. So I might say the sky is purple, and the sentence exists. It might also exist as a thought in me, and I can say that thought exists. So in that sense, it is vidyate, means I believe in it, I know it, and it is bhava means it exists, right? So my knowing it means it exists in my mind, or the sentence exists and somebody else can know it. But it is not true. Sky is not purple, but the thought that sky is purple or the sentence that the sky is purple can exist. Now, this distinction between truth and meaning only arises when we speak about semantic objects or when we speak about sentences. If we talk about a table, for example, or some physical object, table is a wrong example, I'll come to that in a second. If you just talk about physical things, then existence itself is considered true. In logic, for example, there is this famous decoupling or expansion of logic where it is said that to say that something is true is only to say that something exists, and to say that sky is blue is to say that this is expanded in logic, is to say that there is something that called sky that exists and the sky is blue. But what really exists, you don't know, because it might be your hallucination or your experience, or it might be true, but it might not always exist, right? So the tree might be seen right now, but might not exist a few years from now. So if you say the sky is blue or this tree exists, is it always true? Because logical truth or universal truth is supposed to be always true in all places, in all times. So the sky might seem blue here because the sky is clear, but in another place it might be dusty or cloudy and might not seem blue, it might seem dark or yellow and things like that. So there's a difference between what exists, what is knowable, what is true, and then what was before that it came into existence. And the first distinction is that between existence and truth. Now we have many common examples of that, like sky may I might think the sky is purple, but it's not really purple, but yet I might see it as purple, or I might think as a purple, think as being purple, or I might say that the sentence sky is purple exists. So because of these forms of existence, we distinguish between the existence of a sentence or existence of a thought or existence of a experience from the truth of that thought or experience or perception. So the first distinction arises, everything that exists is not necessarily true, and this is because the existence is different from the meaning of that existence. So for example, if you say the sentence, the sky is purple, the existence of the sound or the words, the grammatical formation is the existence, but the meaning is that there is something called the sky which has the property of being purple, property of the color being purple, and the sentence exists, the meaning exists, but the meaning is not true, right? So when we draw these distinctions, then we can say that existence doesn't always entail the truth. But if we don't have or if we don't treat the world as as a difference, as a combination of meaning and things, or the symbols of meaning, in this case the sentence is a symbol of meaning, but if we don't treat the world as symbols, that point we would end up saying that merely because the sentence exists, therefore I don't have to worry about what it means, and because I don't worry about what it means, therefore I don't have to worry about whether it is true. The existence of the sentence itself is truth, and this is how truth is studied in modern science. For example, if you say that Somebody will ask, does an electron exist, or does a proton exist? And the answer in physics would be, yeah, I made an observation. This observation detected, certain clicks or certain trajectories, and therefore the electron exists. But a deeper question could be that by that analogy, I could have been dreaming, or I might have this thought, I might have this experience that the sky is purple, and therefore, that is also true. So, the distinction between experience or knowing, even existence, because the distinction is drawn between this existence and truth. Therefore, it is possible at this moment, let's just say it's possible that all that we see is not actually true, and yet it exists. Right? So that would kind of bring me back to the point that we started with by saying that this material world is said to be an illusion in some sense, and therefore many people kind of conclude that it really doesn't exist, that it's all phantasm of my, or it's an imagination of my mind or brain and things like that. But there are also systems in philosophy where we say the world really exists. And these two systems of philosophy, one which say the world exists and the other one that says it doesn't exist, it's a fantasy, phantasm, seem to be contradictory, but they don't have to be contradictory if we bring in the distinction between existence and truth. So you could say that the world exists as false propositions. The proposition exists, but it is false. So whatever I am experiencing, is can be a. So I might say that I observe the electron, and therefore the electron exists. But if we asked what is the meaning of this electron, in other words, if the electron is like a sentence, the existence of that electron doesn't mean it is true. Right? So all physical sciences can now be subject to this question of being an illusion. Not illusion in the sense that I don't see it, but in the sense that it's a false proposition. The proposition exists, but it is not true. And we'll come back to how this falsity exists and things like that after we discuss how this thing comes into existence itself. Now, the answer to that later question is that it always existed as a possibility. It was, and that's why it is said, na sato vidyate bhava. Bhava means that which has come into present must have existed, because whatever doesn't exist cannot come into existence. And that goes back to that previous conversation we had in the last episode about ex nihilo creations. So nothing can come out or nothing can manifest which did not exist previously. It had to have existed, but it was unmanifest. It was avyakta. It was not expressed. So what existed previously was simply a possibility. It was avyakta, unmanifest, and now it has become a reality or something that I can know or experience, and because it has become yakta or expressed or knowable, it has come from something that previously existed. And what previously existed is existing eternally. So the possibility is eternal. Now, to take an example which might make sense to a lot of people, we can talk about dinosaurs. So evolutionary theory, for example, would say that dinosaurs evolved from more primitive, biological entities. And after some time, the dinosaurs became extinct. And today we do not see dinosaurs. Now, there are two different descriptions of this evolutionary process. And sort of this is a problem that most people do not understand, because evolution can be a fact, but the explanation of the evolution, or we can call the theory of evolution, can be different from. So you might accept the fact of evolution, but not the theory of evolution. And in the modern theory of evolution, we would say that there were atoms and molecules. There's nothing like possibility. So dinosaur doesn't exist eternally as a possibility, but these atoms and molecules combine, and some structure or body which we call the dinosaur is created, and then these molecules disperse and the dinosaur disappears. That means dinosaur is not existing eternally. But we say that the dinosaur exists eternally as a possibility. And again, going back to that point, nasato vidyate bhavo, that which did not exist eternally as a possibility cannot come into existence, because that would mean ex nihilo creation. Now, the ex nihilo in this case pertains to information. You can say that this aggregation of molecules into a body that we call dinosaur involves certain amount of complexity, information. And because the dinosaur was created in a certain age, therefore this information was created, and then this information was destroyed. But in this case, in the Vedic philosophical case, we say that information is not created, it is not destroyed. It was there. Previously, the dinosaur existed as a possibility, it became manifest, and then again it became unmanifest. Right? So that's the meaning of nasato vidyate bhava. If you simply say nasato vidyate bhava, it implies that the dinosaur did not come out of vacuum, information was not created. And today, whatever, dinosaurs are not seen, but they have not ceased to exist. That's the next sentence, nabhava vidyate sataha. So nabhava means something that's absent, vidyate means that which is knowable, and sataha means that which exists. So that which exists eternally cannot be known to have become totally absent, right? It has ceased to exist, and yet we are not able to see it, right? So this distinction between possibility and reality, which is different from the distinction between reality and truth. This first distinction between possibility and reality helps us make yet another difference between what this notion of what exists or doesn't exist, and if it exists, then it is also true, but if it doesn't exist, then it was sort of this created. Now let's briefly talk about what do we mean by possibility, and in what shape, form, etc. it exists. We have discussed about the three aspects of God and three aspects of soul, and we said that these three aspects also exist in matter. So there are three kinds of possibilities, and they're Sat, Chit and Anand. The Sat is the possibility of all concepts or ideas, like dinosaur, dog, cat, yellow, human beings, races, colors, all these things which are all universals as ideas. Then similarly, there's a possibility for individuals, right? So there can be an instance of yellow, instance of dinosaur, instance of human, instance of a chair, and things like that. And the third thing is these relationships. So relationship of father and mother, friends, brother, master and servant, owner of a company, owner of a land, king of a land, and so on. So there's like these infinite kinds of relationships. So this is the possibility. There are three kinds of possibilities: of concepts, of relationships, and of individuals. But every possibility also has to combine with some other possibility to become observable, or what we called bhava. Bhava means that has come into present or existence, and vidyate, which means I can now know it. So it has to combine, which means to say that if the idea of dinosaur exists eternally, but it doesn't combine with an individual, which means no individual is born as a dinosaur. The dinosaur is simply an idea at the present moment. And if it doesn't combine, then we do not see a dinosaur. So what is coming into existence, and even if it became a combined with a individual, the universal combined with an individual, I might not know that dinosaurs really exist. And this is what the movie Jurassic Park is all about, that there is a world in which dinosaurs exist, but somehow some people go into the Jurassic Park and then they see the dinosaurs, right? So these three things have to exist. The dinosaur idea has to exist eternally. It has to combine with an individual to create a dinosaur. But you might not know the dinosaur really exists, so you have to come in contact with it. So you have to have a relationship with that. And when you come into that relationship, that's when you get this Jurassic Park situation, where there is a dinosaur, there's an idea, there's an individual dinosaur, and then you are seeing it. So to see or to have this experience, these three possibilities have to combine. The possibility of an idea, that of an individual, and that of a relation. Now, once they all combine, then you get this experience of the present, which is you call experience, and then you can say it exists. So, what is possibilities? It is these three types of possibilities, and what we call experience or reality or observation is the combination of these three possibilities. Now the contention is made in Vedic philosophy that some of these combinations are true, some of them are not. Some of them are right, some of them are not. Some of them are good, and some of them are not. Now, it's relatively easier to make the distinction between right and wrong, good and bad, by these combinations. So, for example, you can say that I have a knife and I can use that to cut fruits and vegetables, and that is sort of a legitimate use of the knife. But somebody else can also use the knife to hurt another person, and that would be an illegitimate use. Now again, in these two cases, there is a combination. There is a knife, there is an idea knife, there is an individual knife, and it's being combined with something else. In the first case, a fruit, and another case, let's say somebody's hand. And the first one is the right use of the fruit, of the knife, and in the second case, it's a wrong use. Similarly, you can say that on a cold day, fire gives me happiness, pleasure. So there is a combination, there's an interaction, and you can say this is a good use of fire. On a hot day, when things are really, really hot, and then you sit in front of fire, you can say this is not a good use of fire. So right and good becomes relatively easier to explain. It is little harder to explain whether this combination is also not true, right? Let's now come to what do we mean by whether this combination is true or false. Now the basic idea is that you have words in the sentence. You have dictionaries, for example, and the words are there in that. They are sounds and they have meanings, but you can combine these words in many different ways to construct infinite different sentences. So some of these sentences are true and some of these sentences are false. not everything that can be created from the dictionary words is necessarily going to be true. But does it mean the words themselves are unreal? No, the words are real in the sense that they are eternally existing, so they are eternally a possibility, and the combination of the words are also eternally a possibility. But sometimes when these combinations are produced and a sentence is created, that at that point the sentence becomes a fact, and you can know it, it's observable and things like that, but it is not true. Right? So in one sense we can say that because the sentence is created from dictionary words, therefore the words are real, the combination was eternally possible, and yet it is false. So existence of falsity doesn't mean hallucination. It simply means a wrong sentence, a sentence whose meaning is wrong. It doesn't mean the world has ceased to exist. That means the claim that it is avidya or ignorance or illusion doesn't mean it literally doesn't exist. It exists as a sentence whose meaning is false. Now, when we say that the the things in this world are false, this is not a claim about absolute falsity. It is simply a claim saying that the words in a dictionary exist and they can be combined. The possibility of the words and the possibility of their combination is eternal, and yet the combinations are false. That is not an absolute statement about everything is false. It is simply saying that some of the things or most of the things can be false. Because if everything was false, then it would eliminate the possibility of knowledge from this world. For example, impersonalists make this claim that this world is false, but if that was the case, then even Vedic scriptures would be false. There would be absolutely no claim that can be made that is correct. And if those claims cannot be made, then I cannot know the nature of reality, because let's say the Vedic scriptures which are giving me information about reality would also be false. After all, they are claims that exist in this world as books and verses and text and so on. So if we start saying that everything is false, or either it doesn't exist, which we said that that would also entail that whatever I sort of know is only my hallucination or imagination, and therefore the world really doesn't exist. But even if you say that the world exists and you still say it is false, in that situation also we would end up with this conundrum that I cannot know the nature of reality. So both situations lead to the collapse of knowing the truth, at least in this world. So we have to refrain from this idea that the world is a hallucination, because then reality would be unknowable. Similarly, we have to refrain from the claim that everything is false, because that would mean that reality is completely unknowable. So we have to accept or say that certain things in this world are true and certain other things are false. Right? So Vedic scriptures would be an example, or any knowledge claim saying that this is true would be a claim that certain things are true, which means the combinations are true. Right? And those and some combinations are false and some combinations are true, but we have to be able to distinguish between which combinations are true and which combinations are false. Now, once we accept that certain claims are true, The next claim that is made is that when false claims are made, then certain other true claims become untenable. For example, you might say that the sky is purple, and that would make the claim that the sky is blue untenable. Because in a logical system, if the sky is blue, then it cannot simultaneously be purple at the same place, at the same time, for the same person, in the same situation. So we would have to say that certain claims become untenable. So the existence of falsity essentially eliminates certain other possibilities. And this is then the cause of evolution of this world, which means to say that when a false claim is made, certain other claims become untenable and therefore they're not observable. For example, if you indeed saw the sky was purple, then you would not see the sky as being blue at the same time, and that would change or make it impossible to know that the sky is blue at the same time. But then after some time, sky might come back blue, and then you might say the sky is purple is a false claim. So the existence of falsity is the cause of the evolution of this world, because the existence of these falsities eliminates certain other claims, and those claims become untenable, at least for a brief period of time. So if all the claims were true, then the changes of this world would stop. That means if I say that I am a human being, that claim would cease to be true after some years when I die. But if this claim was indeed true, then it should never become untenable. Thus, a difference is drawn between a spiritual world and a material world. And the difference is this. In the material world, there are many false claims. Doesn't mean everything is false, but there are indeed many false claims. And because these claims are false, the world evolves, which means certain things appear, the dinosaurs appear, and the dinosaurs disappear. And the appearance of the dinosaur is basically some soul saying that I am a dinosaur. And because that claim is false, after some time the claim disappears and another claim appears. But in the spiritual world, only true claims are made. And all the claims, they are true, therefore they don't preclude the possibility of other true claims. And since all these claims can exist simultaneously, therefore the world doesn't evolve. Now, in one sense, the material world is more encompassing or bigger, so to speak, in terms of all the claims, because it contains true claims and it also contains false claims. And the spiritual world is sort of smaller in the sense that only true claims are made. But in another sense, what happens is that when you make a false claim, lots of other claims which might otherwise be true are also eliminated. So, from a perspective of possibilities, these two worlds are literally infinite. But from the perspective of certain things only existing which are true versus certain subsets of those possibilities existing in this material world which are true at a certain moment in time, this subset, because it is smaller, therefore the world also seems small. Now, this is if we can understand these things very nicely over a period of time, we might be able to show and prove that this material world becomes smaller or equal to size in terms of all that can exist. All that can be true at a given point in time. But for now, let's just accept that the possibilities are infinite. A certain subset of possibilities is true, and certain subset of possibilities is false. And when it is false, then it evolves over a period of time. But when it is true, it doesn't evolve, so it remains sort of eternal. Now, based on this distinction between truth and false, the next claim is made in Vedic scriptures that certain things, even in this world, are eternally true. And that doesn't mean that they don't appear and disappear in this world. It simply means that they're eternally present in the spiritual world. So, for example, when God advents in this world, that's an eternal truth. It's not that God appeared once and I could, then I can see Him eternally. No, God appears and then disappears. So this appearance and disappearance in this world doesn't mean that God is non-eternal or God is also temporary. It simply means that God's appearance is temporary, not that God is temporary. And that distinction is made because God is eternally a possibility, and therefore as a possibility He is eternally existing. And then there is an appearance, just like you might say, you might utter a sentence which is called manifestation. And when that manifestation occurs, then you can see. But somebody can still argue that even though I could see God at that point in time, but God could still be a false statement, just like you might say sky is purple. And because the statement is false, therefore the statement disappears, and therefore God's appearance was there at that moment, but it is not eternal truth. It is eternal possibility. It was experienced at a certain time, but it is not true. Now, that claim is rejected by saying that there is a world in which God eternally exists. And but how do you substantiate that claim? And the answer to that is that there is a subset of possibilities which can manifest, and they are mutually consistent possibilities. So the appearance of one of these possibilities doesn't eliminate the possibilities which are true in that subset. And when we take that subset of possibilities which are mutually consistent, then there is no need for a change. And that basically comes down to the proposition that all change occurs because there is an inconsistency in your system of claims. So, for example, this is a crude example where you might say that two propositions X and Y are true, but X and Y are incompatible claims. So you might sometimes say that X is true and therefore Y is false, and then Y would be sort of cease to exist, or as a claim, because it's incompatible with X, and X sort of becomes more dominant as a claim, and people start believing in that claim, and after some time Y may become the stronger claim, and then X is eliminated as a claim. So an illustration of that idea would be that today in today's world, science has a lot of dominance. So we make these claims about scientific truth and things like that, and all religious claims are slowly disappearing in this world, or even if they exist in this world, they are being modified to somehow become compatible with scientific claims. But if the religious claims became dominant, then scientific claims would gradually disappear. Insofar as both these claims exist, you would see a clash between religion and science, because each one is trying to become more dominant. But these claims cannot exist simultaneously. So if atheism or materialism rises, then religiosity or understanding of God and soul will slowly die down, and vice versa. So change in this world is the result of these contradictions. When you have two contradictory claims, one of the claims becomes more dominant and the other claim gets subordinated. And this is a very generic theme of change that I'll probably discuss in a future episode, where all change is essentially a change in the dominant and subordinate patterns of these diverse ideas. We have already talked about how these claims are all possibilities, but a subset of these possibilities are consistent and compatible. And when one claim rises to dominance, everything that is compatible or consistent with it sort of also becomes dominant, and everything that is incompatible or inconsistent with that claim becomes subordinate. And when it becomes subordinate, it slowly ceases to exist, but it doesn't completely become absent. So the preliminary idea about the difference between the material world and the spiritual world is this. The difference is that in the material world, the claims tend to be mostly or almost always incompatible. And this incompatibility causes the evolution of this world. So it's not an evolution that is driven by, like in modern science, we say that you have premise and then you have a conclusion, and the conclusion follows logically from the premise, right? And we can say that the conclusion is consistent with the premise. So in Western logic, all change, for example, in modern science, if you were to describe the change, then there's a law of change, and according to that law, the premise logically follows from, the conclusion logically follows from the premise. But in the material world, the system explanation is that change happens because there is incompatibility between the claims, and these incompatible claims become more prominent and and subordinate. So for example, if you look at the political doctrines, there is this clash always between the left wing and the right wing ideologies. The right wing basically says that individuality is important, my culture, my heritage, all these things are important. But what happens is that because there are discrepancies in society, and some people have been richer, more powerful, more educated, and so on. And all those people who have been subordinated in society, they sort of rebel, and then the opposite ideology comes into play, which says that all people are equal, so they must be given equal opportunities, equal access to wealth and education and things like that. So each of these ideologies is incomplete in itself, because it is not delivering the good for everybody. And because they are incomplete, there is a natural tendency to change them. And when the change happens, what we do is we say that let's look at the opposite ideology which is incompatible with it. And because if this is incomplete, then the opposite probably is better. and therefore we bring in the opposite ideology. So this is the dynamic of change, in which everything that is false is also said to be incomplete. And incompleteness simply means it brings problems, and when these problems arise, then we seek for an answer to that problem, and when we seek an answer, we pick up an incompatible ideology, which is also incomplete, right? So between these two opposites, there is an incompleteness, because each one is individually incomplete. And between these two opposites, there is an inconsistency, because they are both, logical opposites or conceptual opposites. And because they are both incomplete, therefore there's a tendency to look for the opposite ideology. And even the opposite is incomplete, therefore that incompleteness is going to bring back the first ideology. So this is the flipping of opposites in this world. And that flipping of opposites is the cause of, or as the phenomena of change. And this flipping arises because no matter what you change it to, as long as you keep on picking stuff or ideas or propositions or claims that are incomplete claims, you will keep on changing them. Now this is where the spiritual world is different, that an alternative is picked that is not incomplete. It is a complete proposition, and when it becomes a complete proposition, it doesn't need an opposite, because it is already complete. And when it becomes complete, then the opposites disappear, and when the opposite disappear, then the change stops. So the cause of change in this material world is that everything is incomplete. Now that's, you can go back to that Purnamadaha Purnamidam claim. There are two kinds of Purna. One is that you can have a material world which is all kinds of individually incomplete and collectively inconsistent claims, and you can have a world where everything is individually complete and collectively consistent. And the material world will still evolve because everything is individually incomplete. So you have left-wing ideology, it has some problems. To solve the problems, you bring the right-wing ideology, but that also has some problems. So then you go back to the left wing. So this is the model of cyclic change, in which one thing becomes dominant, then it subordinates the opposite, and the opposite thing, because the first thing already had problems. So when it becomes very dominant, the problems of the first thing become very, very obvious. And then the second thing is brought, but the second thing also has problems. So because each claim is incomplete claim, therefore they keep cycling. Therefore, several, seemingly incompatible claims are made in Vedic philosophy. The first claim is that the material energy is also eternal, and what we mean by that eternity is that it's like a dictionary of words. The dictionary is eternal; all the words are possible. The second thing, we say that all the sentences that can be made from the combination of words in this dictionary, they are also eternally possible. So in that sense also the material world is eternal. But because some claims are mutually consistent and some claims are mutually inconsistent, and this material world, if you bring in one inconsistent claim, at that point in time there will be something wrong in this world which will tend to cause a flip in the mode, and therefore this world will keep on changing. Now, if most of the people are sort of good people, or they make the right claims, they're good claims, they're true claims, then this inconsistency, or one or two people who are sort of making the wrong claims, making false claims and so on, they would be subordinated. And this is described as the duration of the ages, right? Satya Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapar Yuga, and Kali Yuga, in which In the Satyuga phase, most of the people are good. And slowly, uh, the number of people who are engaged with the truth, right and good, they decline. And as they decline, the conflicts increase. And when we come to the point of Kali Yuga, the conflicts become extremely intensified. And when they become intensified, they are not losing their individual strength, right? So there's both left wing and right wing. There's, all these opposing ideologies will continue to exist, and they will keep on flipping very, very rapidly. Whereas in the Satyuga, the ideologies would not flip. Simply one ideology will remain very dominant and the other ideology will remain subordinated. But as they become equal in strength, they start competing, clashing, fighting with each other, and then they start flipping. So very, very quickly, that's why you see in a span of, sometimes in 10, 15 years, you'll see a left-wing government come in and the whole world is swept by socialism. And then another 15, 20 years, you'll see again right-wing ideology comes back into power, and the world is swept by conservatism or right-wing thinking and things like that. So in the Satyuga time frame, these conflicting ideologies, it's not that they did not exist, but they are simply subordinated, and society remains very, very stable. But by the time you come to this position of Kali Yuga, where both these opposites, they have become almost equal power, and once they start getting almost equal power to battle with each other, they incorporate each other's ideas, and the differences become sort of very, very nuanced and subtle, and but they keep on flipping very, very rapidly, right? So as time progresses, over hundreds of thousands of years in this age of Kali Yuga, you would see that things will become extremely unstable, right? So the governments, for example, will fall, they'll come into power, they'll remain there for 6 months. People will just change their mind. Oh, this is not working, there's too much problem. They won't even get a chance to do anything. And again, government will fall, again a different ideology will come, and then just keep on flipping rapidly. So the cause of this change is that each ideology is incomplete, and they are inconsistent with other ideologies. So there's constant fighting. So Kala Yuga, for example, Kala means argument, fighting, conflict and things like that. So this is the cause of change. But in the spiritual world, what you get is a system of complete claims, and because they're complete, they can eliminate all that is incomplete, and whatever is incomplete is also inconsistent. So this theme we'll probably discuss in a future episode. What is this nature of completeness and consistency, and how these are the central causes of change. Now, the conclusion or the simple theme here is that change is not happening due to logical consistency from the premises to the conclusions. Rather, what is happening is that there are certain things which exist at the present, which we can call bhava, right? We talked about bhava and vidyate, which is knowable. So some things are known at the present, but this is not complete knowledge. Something is missing, and because it's missing, it brings in more problems. Those problems now become questions, right? So how do I solve this problem? What is wrong with this present? How do I make this present better? And the answer is, well, the only alternative seems to be the opposite of what we're talking about. And therefore, as the problems begin, and then we try to incorporate the opposites. And that leads to a conflict which then keeps on flipping or changing in this world. So the model of change is not driven by consistency. So when we speak about rationality in this world, our current models of rationality are all saying that I can have built up in knowledge slowly through consistent claims, and then even if they are incomplete right now, I would sort of make them complete over a period of time. But that is not the way history evolves. And this is what there is a famous book which it's called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. And he talks about that there is a phase of slow growth in science, and then there's a paradigm change. And the paradigm change essentially brings in, destroys whatever exists previously, and it brings a new set of ideas. But what Kuhn did not talk about is that, so he has this sawtooth structure of change where sort of there is slow rise and then sudden fall, and then again slow rise and then sudden fall, and things like that. That is partially true, but we have a more sophisticated in Vedic philosophy notion of this idea that the change is cyclical, where you have everything that you get is incomplete, and that competes with the opposite, and then this changes keep on going cyclically. So that's the difference between the material world and the spiritual world. Whereas that spiritual world remains stable because it is complete. This material world remains unstable because everything individually is incomplete. And yet we say Purnamadaha Purnamidam, which means this is also complete. And what that means is that this is two different kinds of completeness, in the sense that all the sentences that you could say there and you could say here are possible here too. So in that sense, all the sentences are, but they are not bhava there, they are not manifest, they are not vidyate there, they are not knowable there, they are not experienced. So you don't say that. So certain things like false claims do not exist in spiritual world. Are they possible? Yeah, theoretically they are possible. Whereas in this world, these become vidyate, they become knowable, they become present and things like that. So from perspective of possibility, the material world and the spiritual world is exactly identical. Everything is possible there, everything is possible here. But the difference is that the false claims do not become visible, apparent, knowable, and things like that, whereas they become visible here in this world. And when they become visible, a conflict is created and cyclical change happens, whereas in that world, the cyclical change doesn't happen. Now, another kind of claim is made that just because, so in the spiritual world, sort of time passes also. For example, there is day and night. People get up. Krishna, for example, goes to the forest with his cows. He plays with his friends, and then the sun sets, and then he comes back home, right? And then the cycle repeats again. So there is a cyclical change there too. And people might say that, oh, there is change happening there and there is change happening here. So that, change is also, indicative of temporariness. And because it's temporary, therefore it's non-different or similar to this world. And because this world is called illusion, ignorance, and things like that, therefore any kind of change would entail the existence of temporariness. So this is where we need to sort of nuance and enhance our understanding of the reason these changes happen. And to understand that, we need to draw a distinction between change and motion. And what we mean by change in motion, let me pick an example from atomic theory, and I'll generalize this example to help us understand what is the difference between change and motion. Now, in this world, when I'm speaking, and we discussed this before, I tend to lose energy. And once I lose energy, I get tired. Now there are two models of description. In modern science, we would say that there was some energy in my body and I lost that energy, and energy went out, and therefore there's something physical went out. But that doesn't consider, so that's a classical physical description of the world, where body has energy, the energy leaves the body. But in when we talk about the world as possibility, then we have to say that there is a body that's energized and there is a body that's non-energized. And these two bodies are existing simultaneously as possibility. So when we talk about change, then the non or the energized body, becomes unmanifest, becomes, avidyate or abhava. So the energized body becomes absent, it's not knowable, and the non-energized body becomes manifest. It becomes vyakta. So this is what we call change. And so in the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that just as the body evolves from childhood to youth to old age, similarly there is a change at the time of death. Now this is talking about change. It is different from motion, and I'll come to that in a moment. But change essentially means the body's capacities are changing. In a very simple sense, energized body to non-energized body, and then you eat food again, or you sleep again, or rest again, and then body sort of becomes energized. So from energized body to non-energized body, back to energized body, and so on. So that's change. It's a change in the body, because both these bodies are simultaneously existing as a possibility, but the soul moves from one body to another body, right? So what's the difference between change and motion? The difference is this. When you have lost energy, your capacities or capabilities have changed. And this is, in atomic theory, we say that the object is an ensemble of possibilities. It's a collection of possibilities. So in the energized state, you could run, you could walk, you could talk, you could write, you could cook, you could eat, and many of these capacities or capabilities get reduced or changed, right? So sometimes, certain things that if I keep talking for a few hours, after some time I'll feel tired, I won't be able to talk. So my capacity or capability of talking has reduced. So we can say the ensemble or the ensemble of possibilities has changed. And that change in the ensemble of possibilities constitute or represent the word change. Whereas motion is different. Motion is, my possibilities are not changing, but I am instantiating one possibility after another. So for example, I might have an energized body, and I can, with that body, I can either stand up or sit down or move my hand or move my eyes and things like that. So within the energized body, there are several possibilities, and I can enact them and one after the other. So if the possibility is not changing, so there is no change, but the succession of enacting these possibilities constitutes what we call motion, right? So I might go from this room to the other room in the energized body, and then so that would constitute motion. But because if I keep walking, I'll get tired, therefore body is changing. Now in this material world, what happens is this change and motion are so intertwined that we are unable to make a distinction, and that's the whole problem of conflict between atomic physical description of the world, which is a description of the world as possibility, and the classical physical description of the world, which is motion, right? So there is the atomic theory is describing change, and then classical physical theory is describing motion. And because motion and change are so intertwined, that we are unable to distinguish between these two things. And what that essentially means is that if I talk for some time, I am moving my tongue, so there is some motion. But then as a result of that motion, I'll also get tired, so the body is changing. So there's motion, change, motion, change, and so on. And that's the nature of this world. But in the spiritual world, what happens is this change doesn't happen, and yet motion keeps on happening. And what it means to say that the capabilities or the possibilities that the body can perform do not change, right? So when Krishna goes to the forest, he doesn't lose the capacity, or when he comes back, he's not tired. He can go back to the forest again, and yet he comes back. So when we compare, when we say that, because things are happening cyclically even in the spiritual world, and they're happening cyclically in this material world, therefore both are cyclical changes, and therefore that cannot be the absolute truth, that cannot be the eternal truth, because change is happening in both the worlds. And that claim is false because there's a difference between change and motion. And in the spiritual world, there is only motion, which means you go, but you don't get tired. In this material world, you go, you do something, and you feel tired, right? So if this distinction between motion and change is not made, then it gives the appearance that because both are changing, or both are, there's day and night happening there, and day and night happening here, therefore these both worlds are changing, and therefore they're not eternal, and whatever is not eternal cannot be considered absolutely true. So this argument essentially rests upon the confusion between motion and change, and this confusion exists because in this world it is very difficult to understand or decouple motion and change. However, when somebody like yogis, in the Vedic description, it said that yogis can elongate their life for a very, very long time, or they can keep doing things even if they don't eat food, they don't feel tired, and so on. So a certain amount of this yogic mystical experience can affirm people to believe that that you don't always have to get tired when you have to work, and that happens because there is motion happening without change happening, right? So the body doesn't have to go from childhood to youth to old age to death at let's say 80 years or 100 years. It can go on for thousands and thousands of years, and that's because the change is slowed down dramatically, but motion keeps on happening. So that is when that conclusion is taken to its logical limit, then we can say that there can be eternal motion without change. And what that means is there is no birth, death, there is no person getting older over a period of time, and eventually dying, and so on. So we have to distinguish between these. The cause of change, as we said earlier, is that there is incompatibility and inconsistency between two opposite claims, but because each claim is incomplete, therefore the opposite seems to be necessary, and so when the opposite is brought in, a conflict is created. And that cyclical change is really change, it's not motion. And therefore this material world is said to be changing, but modern science models it as motion, right? So this conflict is created between change and motion, but it requires a more subtle understanding of how the world exists as a possibility. But the possibility has meaning, the meaning is incomplete. To complete the meaning, we take the opposite meaning. Now that creates a conflict, and that causes a change. Whereas in the spiritual world, the possibilities are still eternal, but only the the consistent, only the complete possibility is manifest, and therefore there is no necessity for adding anything external, and whatever is external remains unmanifest and is not visible, and therefore conflict is not created, and therefore cyclical change is not necessary. What we see cyclically changing or is not actually change, it's only motion.